Welcome to Behind the Seams, a transparent look into the world of fashion. Hosted by
Anne Price, Emily Burns,
and Michaela Albright.
The sun is piercing through your curtains. The light of another day has unset. You open your eyes, turn off the alarm, and it says it's 8:15 a.m. Panic shocks your body as you realize you've overslept by 30 minutes, and with that, you've put yourself at risk of being late to work. You know that if you don't get to work by 9 a.m. sharp, that your boss is not going to be very happy. If you get there any later than 9:20, maybe you'll even get fired. But truthfully, this is not the first time this has happened to you. The all too familiar, should I just speed? Debate enters your mind. Maybe you'll get into a car accident, but you probably won't, right? Speed limit signs are whizzing past you. You're doing 90 in a 60-mile lane. You think you know what you're doing, but all of a sudden, the car spins out of control, and your life, as well as others' lives, are jeopardized. We do this a lot in today's world. Rush and compromise on the important things like time, attention, and safety to satisfy an unrealistic deadline or expectation. But can we truly meet these deadlines and expectations if we're cutting corners and acting recklessly in the process? For a while now, consumer demand for fast fashion has proceeded as the unrealistic deadline for our industry to meet. As we go on producing at this rate, we're putting our industry and the world at a higher risk of danger. So, the only way not to crash? We must slow down. We have Dr. Kristen Baer, Assistant Professor of History and Co-Director of the Women's Studies program, with more on this concept.
Can you slow down fashion? And I thought, oh, well, that's really the crux of the problem, right? Is that fashion, just like lots of other things, including food production, is large scale, mass marketing, mass consumption, mass consumerism, corporatism, mass employment, right, with great disparity between wealth and labor, right? So, but it seemed that the only place that you see sustainability that you can trace is something that's slowed down. So there's this thing called slow fashion to take a small regional place where production happens and have sustainable raw materials, sustainable production, but also sustainable labor, right? Which is to say non-exploitative labor. So if you're asking me these questions in relation to feminism, this is of course like everything else gendered, right? But it cuts across all of these different issues. It's not just a women's issue. Yes. Are women heavily represented in the labor force when it comes to fashion production? Yes. Are they underpaid and exploited globally? Yes, that's a part of globalization. So it's not just women. It's children, it's people of color, it's men, it has to do with gender, right? So all of these issues sort of come together in complicated ways. So for me, it seems that sustainable fashion has to be local and slowed down, and it has to not just be about materials. It has to also include the complications of labor, right? Resources, exploitation.
As consumers of the Western world, let's not forget where we once came from. We too had to break the barriers of exploitative labor and create regulations to conserve our resources. However, though globalization has mobilized our economies by leading risky manufacturing jobs away from our people and to out-of-reach places, our understanding and connection to this process has also moved with it. Here we have Peter Brickman, Senior Professional Lecturer of Fashion Merchandising, discussing alternative methods of education.
I went to an alternative school when I was young, probably the 4th through the 6th grade, and was actually a working farm. The problem was each student was given an animal to take care of during the course of the year, and I had a duck. And I took care of the duck, I fed the duck, took care of the duck. And then one day we were all told to get our animals and stand on line, and they chopped the head off my duck and made my parents buy the duck. And the duck was in the freezer in my house for years because I was just horrified by, I had no idea that the duck was going to turn into food. I just didn't know that. They didn't prepare me for that. Do you know, to this day, I cannot eat duck. I won't eat duck. I won't do it. I can't. And there's no other reason. I'll eat chicken. I feel sorry for chickens, get their heads chopped off too, but that is, so when I'm saying it needs to be at an appropriate time, we need to understand that. And of course, listen, I can talk myself out of eating a hamburger if I really think about where it came from. I think I could be a vegan if I really, because I get upset about things like that. But but in reality, we suspend our belief about certain things.
What Peter Brickman said was actually really funny to me. When I first watched Food Inc., I thought I would never be able to eat again. Then I watched The True Cost, and I was like, great, now I can never shop again. So I'm going to die naked and hungry. But then I sat back and realized the goal of these documentaries weren't to make me stop consuming. It was to make me realize I had to start consuming differently. Being so far from it all, being behind this screen, we don't realize the impacts on the environment and on societies. We just believe what the industries tell us. Following is Sonia Roy, Senior Professional Lecturer of Fashion Design and Merchandising on the environmental impacts of fashion.
But it's daunting, too, because you have to know so much more. It's not just about designing pretty things or beautiful things. It's all these other things. And getting around, there's so much getting around the lies that are being told, too. It's so easy to just say, well, I'm using this leather because it was sustainably harvested. Well, yeah, but cows are they are the number one reason for deforestation, right? So if you're in a fashion environment and that's the first time you're hearing it, how can people, just regular people that aren't in fashion, I know they don't know.
It's also really conflicting when you're talking about just like quality in general.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've always like gravitated towards leather because it's more high quality than plastic fake leather. Mm-hmm. But then you have these tanneries that are dumping chemicals.
Right, and a lot of those
concern.
leathers that say they're environmentally friendly, that's all it is. They're not using chemicals that are harmful to the environment. But what about the 100,000 acres of Amazon rainforest that got cut so you could have those cows on those fields? And then what is that? The fact that there are no longer trees there, right? So all those microsystems are gone. Nothing's filtering the water. Then you end up with giant, pink rivers. Pink rivers don't get pink by accident, right? We make them that way. So
I mean, I like the color pink, but not in
rivers. Not in a river, no. I usually mean there's
unless it's cochineal.
Yeah.
The industry's negative impact upon the environment is in dire need of attention. With such monumental progress made in technology today, it is senseless that we are unable to advance our manufacturing processes. Next, we have Misty Martin, product developer at Ibex Outdoor Clothing, addressing the opportunities within sustainable fashion.
Sustainability, and particularly in fashion, is constantly looking at ways to innovate and to push the envelope and to reinvent in hopes to reserve our resources. It's about continuous improvement and going back and looking at things over and over and over again.
Misty Martin has a point. It is extremely important to improve our existing production processes and introduce new methods to the industry to prevent the use of all of our resources. Globalization has provided many locations and alternatives to production. And though the world is vast and plentiful, our land is not endless or everlasting. Here we have Dr. Ann Davis, Associate Professor of Economics, Chair of Economics, Accounting, and Finance, addressing the issues within the supply chain, followed by Melissa Helverson, Affiliate Professional Lecturer of Fashion Merchandising and Sustainability.
Kind of going off of the global supply chain, the majority of the fashion industry operates in that way. A lot of companies do not own their own factories. They outsource and consult different factories that are already in existence within Southern and Southeast Asia. So my question is, do you think that, we've seen this a lot with the slow food movement, where people are a lot more concerned with transparency. do you think that a lot of businesses are going to need to, actually have their own factories and stop kind of jumping from different place, and be held more accountable for their production? Do you think that that's going to come probably in the future, and it might pose a cost for businesses?
Okay, so even if they don't own, and if they hire a subcontractor, they could still say to the subcontractor, hey, you have to do this environmentally sustainably and pay your living wages. And that's why, so right now they're hopping. As soon as wages go up one place, they'll hop to another. And that's why I think it has to be global, that there has to be environmental and labor standards at the global level, or else they'll still hop to the cheapest location.
Eventually, there will not be any place left to exploit. So whether you like it or not, you have to get used to a $40 t-shirt. It's going to be built into the industry now. I mean, even for capitalists, even for profiteers.
There are many opportunities for the future in terms of sustainable development, B Corps, or benefit corporations, being one of them. Many companies have already started in this direction. Applying to become a B Corp involves a commitment to public transparency throughout the supply chain and allows not only for sustainable and ethical production, but further sustainable consumption and investment opportunities. Following is Peter Brickman on the topic of B Corps.
Have you ever heard about the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, or like sustainable investing, where like companies are they sign up to be transparent for their customers? Do you think that's like beneficial to the company or to the customers? Like who benefits from that more?
I think it could be both. They have this thing called, I think it's the Higgs Index, which is a way of measuring how sustainable a particular company is. But we don't see a lot of publicity about that. I think it has to grow more. Mm-hmm. We hear about individual companies doing a good job. We hear about Patagonia and what they do. We hear about a company like Newman's Own who takes no profit whatsoever. All the profits go to their charity. There are companies like Tom's, which make me very nervous by some of the stuff they do, but they're doing now, I just saw something, they're changing their approach a little bit to make it more understandable. A lot of people were fooled by Tom's initially, thinking that the pair of shoes they were giving away was a pair of real Tom's shoes, and it turned out they're a pair of like cardboard shoes. They really weren't anywhere near the same quality. Now they're changing that approach a little bit. So yeah, I think it's possible. It could be a benefit to the company. But think about Patagonia is expensive. That product, they make great stuff. I love their stuff, but I have to gulp when I buy it, and I can afford it. But I'm thinking, well, maybe I'm going to buy something that's half the price and works just as well. So I think if we try, we can do these things. And I think we can get really good publicity about it if we're honest. We have to want to do it, though.
We've spoken a lot about Patagonia in this series, and really it's because it comes back to doing what you can. Patagonia doesn't force itself to be seen as a sustainable company. That isn't how they're branded. Their products brand them. The production of their products is just an augmented feature, an added bonus. Becoming a B Corp is a great step, but it is also a great undertaking. It involves applying regulations throughout the entire supply chain and trusting the outcomes to uphold the standards. Here we have Jennifer Finn, affiliate professional lecturer of fashion merchandising, addressing the reality of B Corps, followed by Misty Martin.
Have you heard of B Corps, and do you think that that's a realistic business model?
I've heard of B Corps. It depends on the industry. It can be viable, that's on there, but at the end of the day, until all parties involved are in that whole supply chain, as well as your just operating expenses, there are going to always be those boundaries that say, I would love to do this, but this is costing this. So it unfortunately is, nobody's going to be in business if they can't make a profit, because then you're eventually going to go under. So there has to be all facets really participating in order for it to work.
The most important things in a supply chain is choosing the right partner. We here at IBEX have chosen partners that are committed to our core values in conservation of natural resources, and I think that that's the best thing that we can do, working together to find solutions and improve upon manufacturing as it exists today.
Next, Amy Hall, the Director of Social Consciousness at Eileen Fisher, discusses change.
I think the goal is to change our business model. First of all, I don't think we need as much clothing as we have in the world, right? How many pieces, if we all went and looked in our closet and counted how many pieces of clothing we have, we don't really need all that clothing. We're 7 days in a week, So I feel like, for one, we have to get at the idea of consumption, which then gets at how much clothing are we really making as apparel companies. And then, that in turn gets at how many resources we're using. I think that if we were to really only make what we need, then the economies of scale will definitely work. We will be able to pay a living wage. We will be able to produce the amount of organic fiber we need in the world. And that doesn't mean we all go out of business. It means that we find other ways to be profitable. We sell services. We sell repair services. We get into that through a circular economy where we're taking back clothing, we're turning it into something new, and we're reselling that without using raw materials. There's all kinds of ways that we can go.
As stated before, innovation is a concept that the industry is extremely familiar with. However, has been slow to use in terms of manufacturing and production. That being said, many companies have tried to take measures towards sustainable manufacturing. However, accuracy and success are not always ensured. Peter Brickman discusses examples of sustainable and innovative production.
I had a wonderful Canadian manufacturer come see me years ago when I was in the sweater business, and what they were doing in Canada was taking old t-shirts, cotton t-shirts, and they were separating the yarn. In other words, they were deconstructing these cotton shirts of all different colors into yarn, and they were then weaving them into sweaters. I thought that was the best thing since sliced bread. That was really a fantastic idea. But guess what? When it came down to the end, their product was 40% more expensive to make. So it never went anywhere. And it was, like you said, it was complicated to do that. But think about how we dispose of yarn. Now, the town I live in Westchester, actually has a yarn and fabric textile recycling center, and you can bring old, garments that have holes in them. Instead of throwing them out, they recycle those. So we are seeing that happen. People recycle plastic now without thinking about it. And we don't have to pay everybody a nickel for every bottle. I haven't taken money back for plastic recycling for years. I put it out every week with my garbage in a recycling bin. We separate newspapers and brown paper and plastic, and we just do it as a matter of course. So again, it's learning. It's buying into the idea that it's a good thing. In the beginning, I wanted a nickel back for everything. And I would stand, and frankly, it was just boring to stand there and plunk them. So I stopped doing that, but yeah.
Among reflecting ethical and green sourcing, newfound production processes must also result in attainable price points for consumers. Not too low, but not too high. Possibly, this will require both industry and consumers to take initiative.
Dr. Michael Panzer, African historian, delves further into the concept of recycling.
This was, the early 90s, I think. I remember we went to go visit South Carolina, and the short story here was that they don't recycle in South Carolina, right? So it's like there's jobs that they could create, but they don't because, if you think about like water bottles of 5 cents, right? In certain states, that's a tax. This is just a tax. And it's like, and the way that they see that, and it's just like, well, it is, but you can redeem it and get it back. They're incentivizing you to get your money back. You pay a little money out of pocket at first, but you get the money back. if you're conscientious about it. So speaking of the role of government, right? And so like imagine doing something like that, like not a 5% tax, but something on corporations or governments can be proactive in incentivizing corporations to a much more conscientious, sustainable mindset.
Recycling is second nature to the majority of the world nowadays. However, prior to the past decade or so, the idea of recycling barely crossed the minds of the public. Think about how much plastic we use a day. Now think about how many clothes the world collectively has together. If clothing is already being treated as disposable, shouldn't we at least figure out a way to sustainably dispose of it?
Since the dawn of time, clothing has always been a part of our society. The fashion industry evolved from our human need for clothing on a physical but also deeply emotional level. While clothing can protect and support us, it also allows us to transition to the next phases of our lives. As we change, our choice of clothing is something that often changes with us. Hence, the ever-prevalent need and want for varied fashion is the reason why the further production of fashion must be sustainable on every level. While our love and need for fashion is everlasting, our ecology, our environment, our resources, and ourselves are not. We cannot continue adapting our world to fashion. We must adapt fashion to our world. In the future, we will see the tables turn as fashion shifts away from rampant low-cost consumerism. The creativity that makes fashion dynamic and unique is unable to keep up with the speed of the industry, and consequently, the art of design is lost. The importance of keeping up with trends will be replaced by strong individualism. We have Jackie Chiquine, Associate Editor of Retail Intelligence at WGSN, on this inevitable shift.
All of these fashion brands, these houses and labels are trying to fight this copycat that we see in fast fashion. And so it'll be interesting if they can really overcome that and sort of take away the lead over their designs. It'll be interesting to see how much power the fast fashion brands have to really sell something new. And if they don't, I think they're really going to have the wind taken out of their sails, because really, like, the quality is not that great to begin with. So if they're not investing in design or ethical labor or finer or more sustainable materials, I think they're really going to get faced with some big decisions to change their business models. Really, it's just the houses feel pressure to sell, and they can't sell unless they have new merchandise hitting the floor in all these department stores and their boutiques, every couple months. I mean, they can not even close to compete with the delivery schedule of a store. They can get a delivery like multiple times a week and completely re-merchandise their store. So they can't compete with that speed, and I think they're going to stop trying to, hopefully, and give a little bit of space to the designers and to the collections. But I think that's really going to affect sales, and I think that's what I mean when like big changes are going to happen, and I think retail might become a little bit less of a big money industry in the way that it is now. It's definitely not a fad. I think it's more of a huge industry change that we're on the cusp of, and not just like a thing that people are really into. I think maybe a few years ago there was a little bit of like a fad towards like organic cotton, and now I think we're seeing brands like Reformation or like Everlane have these more responsible business practices. There is less of a focus on consumption. We're going to have to confront the issue of sustainability en masse eventually. I mean, there's no way getting around. We have to make changes in almost every industry about the environment, because, it's not a endless resource. So we have to change our behaviors, and it's going to be really hard, and I think a lot of companies are really going to struggle for a while, and it's not going to be an easy switch. But I think companies are more and more going to feel pushed to be transparent about their manufacturing.
Here we have Ann Davis, product developer at Ibex Outdoor Clothing, followed by Jennifer Finn, and once again, Jackie Chiquine.
I see in the immediate future that people will move away, are already moving away from disposable fashion, and that's a trend that I really like. Those quick hits, those fads, those joyful experiments may always be there, but I think what will really endure is lasting style.
There's kind of possibly going to be a shift to individualism where there's not going to be a lot of trends and fads because people are more apt to express their fashion on their own terms.
And I agree. I definitely agree with that. I think even if you break it down to, say, denim, it used to be that, oh, this year it's all about boot cuts, or this year it's all about the skinny jean. And if you had the skinny jeans, you couldn't wear your boot cut jeans anymore. And now it's about what your body type is and what you feel good in. So everything goes now. So I think if you just take that little tiny snippet and then spread that, we won't feel as keeping up with the Joneses, in terms of trying to have the latest trend, because everything will just be acceptable.
So trends move so fast now, and people have access to so much visual and all kinds of inspiration that I think a lot of consumers are starting to feel like a trend fatigue. It's so hard to keep up with that it drives people to be more interested in the sort of timeless silhouette, investing in clothes that they feel good about over the long term rather than things that are like a instant gratification kind of purchase. We might be left with like just fast fashion and the like high fashion labels, and then a ton of space in the middle of the market for smaller brands that are sort of like not a fast fashion price point, but also something that's relatively attainable. There's going to be a ton of space in the market for small brands, and we're going to see a lot more show up in the next few years.
So how are we going to make this more seamless? Jennifer Finn and Jackie Shaquine denote the initial concept of easing sustainability into the minds of consumers.
We're always doing, giving back things. Like when my kids donate their clothes, they know exactly this, we bring it over to this community project, and I know in the schools that these clothes are going to, when they outgrow stuff. So, I think that's a way to still be sustainable without.
And I think that's really important to teach kids. And I grew up like thrift shopping with my mom, and that taught me like this is where your clothes go. This is where you can get something that's almost new for not a lot.
Absolutely, and they've seen us. They love to, even in the springtime, they love to do the yard sales, and they find the new books, and there's always a new toy and things of that nature. So there's even that, and I don't think they're thinking of it from as sustainable. They're thinking of it as, oh my God, I can get 10 books for $1 or something like that, kids books, but. To them, it's fun,
The consignment industry has like really picked up recently.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's a good way to make the consumer kind of feel sustainable without, because it brings on, it does, because there's that person that says, I'm getting this great item for a really good value, and then the person who does the consigning says, well, I can there's the capitalist where I can make a couple dollars, but yet I'm still... Rather than just, I consigned, my daughter had beautiful dresses, and I would consign so much of her stuff, because rather than just, I didn't have someone purposely, but even amongst my friends, if we know someone that has a younger sibling or something like that, we're always trying to, bring it to someone personally versus just the goodwill.
Right. I've given like bags of clothes away to my friend who's more of a fashion follower or a lagger. And she loved them all. She was so appreciative, and I was like, yes, get these out of my closet. And it feels so good because it's going
Absolutely. I just did it yesterday, because as kids, they grow out of their sizing so fast. And we joke because there's a chain, and usually with kids' clothes or coats, you write your name in it in case it gets lost. So it's been scratched out 3 times, but it was a good quality North Face that now has just gone through 3 children, and there's that sense of, I think we just like because we don't want to waste. And it's not a matter of the cost of like, oh, I just got this jacket for free. My girlfriend gave it to me. Her daughter outgrew it. But that, you spend all this money on it. I don't want it just to go to waste. I'm so happy that I know somebody that can wear it once my daughter outgrows it, and my girlfriend does that for me. And same thing with the boys. I think that's I think that model is a really easy way to bring more sustainability into, our consumers.
Absolutely.
I think also, like, kind of what McKenna was saying, the rise of consignment.
The
like,
stigma has been taken away from that.
It definitely has, and there's, like,
It's
all
cool
these
to thrift.
apps now, like Tradesy, Poshmark.
Yes.
Yes, ThredUp. I use Poshmark all the time to
If
sell
you
my
really
stuff.
think about it, it almost started with eBay. You know,
Yeah.
they were the ones who really, those eBay stores and stuff.
I bought a pair of boots at the thrift store for $6 and sold them on eBay for $95.
When I had my boutique 10 years ago, there was a woman who always just shopped just my clearance rack. And the clearance rack usually typically was maybe there was a sizing issue, or it was the odds and end left of the assortment. That was the one loan 2 or the loan, 16 or something. And I was curious because she would always just buy random sizes. So I was like, what are you doing? And she says that she would shop department store clearance racks, and then she had her online eBay store, and she was making, this was 10 years ago, and she was making a salary of almost $80,000 a year.
You're kidding.
Because she would put it out there, and then people that were shopping.
It's like flipping, yeah.
It is, exactly. But I think if that's an extreme example, that extreme couponing and all that things, but I think if just the rise in consignment and changing that whole name now, it's all new again, we're being sustainable and we don't even realize it.
Yeah. It's also, too, like, even through those channels, through Poshmark, Tradesy, all those different companies, it is, like, a personal component. Like, I write a letter to the girl that buys my stuff, and I'm like, I hope you have, like, a great experience in these. I know I did, or whatever I'm selling. So it's like it feels the same way as if you're giving it to someone that you know.
Exactly.
Even though they paid you for it.
Right.
And you're just wishing them well.
I think it's a nice balance of that just intrinsic need for us to have some sort of, monetary, but yet feeling good.
And the interesting thing, too, is that with fashion, everything kind of cycles through and comes back.
Yes.
But if you're able to take something old, update it slightly, and you could sell it, or you could, have that in your wardrobe. I've bought in so many things at the thrift store. You cut off a pair of Levi's, or you trim a dress, and it's like, it's so new.
And just educating people with that way, because a lot of people don't think about that. There's some really cool artsy, edgy girls in high school that you've seen that are really just doing things like that. And then you see it again, you're like, wow, how cool is that? But there's so many I'm not going to lie, I am the worst sewer in the world. I cannot sew a button. I am awful. It never lines up. So, I'm fortunate that I found a really good tailor that, I might buy something on clearance that I liked because it was high quality but didn't quite fit me right. But I think just getting people to think about those ways of making it original to you.
Going along with what I said earlier about the smaller brands, I think we're going to see more and more small brands do that. There could be a brand that's got the same edge or sexiness as Reformation but makes everything out of hemp. Like somebody will figure out a cool way to do it. But the market's been so driven into, luxury and fast fashion, and like the middle is just really kind of emptying out. And so when more and more space becomes available in the market and consumers are going to look for an alternative, you can be completely into this one thing and this brand and their brand's voice without even caring about the environment. There's probably tons of people who shop there but could care less about recycling, And so if there are more, I think if more brands could sort of catch up with the contemporary design aesthetic and really capitalize on like what young people want to wear, made in a closed loop system, they'll really strike gold. But have it not be the selling point, almost like something that they didn't even realize that they were buying, because that will help people that are turned off by the sort of like hippy dippiness of, quote unquote sustainable fashion.
Just like with Patagonia, pushing a quote-unquote sustainable brand cannot be the selling point. While in a perfect world, everyone would be passionate about saving the earth and supporting its people, the reality is that the majority of consumers don't look beyond the style of the clothes they're buying. For some people, the term sustainable even has a negative connotation, which could be a threat towards the shift to a sustainable industry. However, by incorporating sustainability into fashion brands in a subtle way, we will eventually reach the point where clothes are just assumed to be sustainable. Dr. Caroline Ryder, Associate Professor in the School of Management, on opportunities for change within the industry.
If the fashion industry wants to make a splash, the fashion industry could start combing the universities of the world for graduate students who are way, way, way up on the cutting edge, and who therefore think differently about all these things. And just start inventing stuff. In about 15 years, they will be heroes, and they will be the standard that other industries will have to meet.
While the world requires a necessary shift back to eco-conscious production and a narrowed focus on ethical production, this doesn't mean that sustainable or future fashion will be boring or limited. As long as imagination and creativity continues to permeate the human race, there will always be room for innovative success within fashion. Here is Dr. Richard Feldman, Associate Professor of Environmental Science, with our first guiding theory.
Okay, so in the fashion industry, it needs to take a left turn and say, okay, we are now producing fashion that's meant to be in your wardrobe for the next 10 years minimum, that the clothes we're producing are durable enough and attractive enough that you're going to want to wear them for at least the next 10 years, and furthermore, they will last for the next 30 years. Okay, so durable fashion that's comfortable and practical, and you'll always look good. That's going to be a radical change right there. So that's number one.
We understand that the idea of creating things to last several decades would harm the foundation of our industry. However, the concept to absorb is that the industry can still produce in two measures. One being that we produce only the quantities that are required by the consumer, hence producing for a true need rather than a want.
Number two is we are going to be committed to producing our products in ways that do not pollute the environment and do not harm the workers. And we are going to use resources that are renewable in the entire line of production, whether it's the energy for our factories or the fibers for our fabrics. It's all going to be renewable. Nothing is going to waste. It's a closed circle. It's cradle to cradle. There's no grave in this process. If there's something that comes out at the end of the assembly line, we'll find a way to use it for something else. It gets worked back into the system, whether it's in our factory or if it can go to some other factory in a different industry. It will be used. And none of the dyes go into the water, and no toxins go up into the smokestack. That's a sustainable fashion industry.
Though, if we're going to continue to produce in excess, then we must find a way to make these goods properly disposable. Dr. Kristen Bayer suggests a profitable initiative towards sustainable fashion practices.
It might all come down to children's fashion, because that's such a huge market, right? When I was a kid, there was not a lot of fashion directed toward children. But now that I have a child, I think in today's world, it is a huge industry, children's fashion. And, it's very smart for any corporation to do this because the little things grow. They grow out of their stuff all the time. So sustainable children's fashion, I think, would be revolutionary.
The concept that in some ways, fashion might always have a disposable component stresses all the more how we must find a way to make these garments biodegradable or recyclable. Amy Hall brings us further into this idea.
My vision for apparel in the future is that one day we will have our clothing, we will wear our clothing, we will love our clothing, and when we're tired of our clothing, we will be able to throw it in the river and have that clothing become nutritious food for the fish and the other life in the water. So it's a true manifestation of waste equals food.
So what does this all come down to? Dr. Michael Panzer closes.
It's sort of a cognizance of place that, we are here for a shortened amount of time on planet Earth, and that we consume resources and we produce certain resources. So to a certain extent, we have to sort of pay it forward and think about the future. And part of that is recognizing that sustainability helps us to preserve what we hope to pass on in future generations, and recognizing a value in something that we assign it.
Thank you for listening to the first season of Behind the Seams.
The fashion industry and its consumers desperately need to address the issues facing our world and our people. We encourage you to spread our message and continue in this movement. It is our goal that sustainable fashion will be a concept understood by everyone and demanded by all.
If you're interested in learning more, follow us on Instagram at Behind the Seams Podcast or visit our website at thefold.marist.edu/behindtheseams. For further questions, email us at behindtheseamspodcast@gmail.com.
This episode of Behind the Seams was produced by Ann Price, Michaela Albright, and myself, Emily Burns. For this episode, we'd like to thank our showcase contributors in order of appearance: Dr. Kristen Bayer, Peter Brickman, Sonia Roy, Misty Martin, Dr. Ann Davis, Melissa Halverson, Jennifer Finn, Amy Hall, Dr. Michael Panzer, Jackie Shaquine, Ann Davis, Dr. Caroline Ryder, and Dr. Richard Feldman. A special thank you to Wayne Price for the original song, Melissa Halverson for Capstone Advising, and the Marist College Fashion Department and Capstone Advising Committee.